So I have a few clients, even that we'd use that, I would trust to hire out. The challenge with hiring out, though, unless a company's been properly vetted, I have seen train wrecks year over year over year.
This is the PMP Industry Insider Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome out to another episode of the PMP Industry Insider Podcast, where we take a look at what is changing in the pest and lawn pest and lawn industry.
Oh, boy.
How about that? Here we go. Yep. And we take you to the front lines to those that are driving those changes. As always, I'm Donnie Shelton, owner of Triangle Home Services, which has Triangle Pest as well as Triangle Lawn. And with me is Mr. Autocorrect himself, Mr. Dan Gordon. Dan, would you like to say good afternoon, introduce our sponsors, introduce our topic, and our very special guest? You got all that? Did you write that down?
1, 2, 3. Yes,
okay,
not in that order, but go ahead. So good afternoon, Dan Gordon, PCO bookkeepers, PCO M&A specialists, exit planning, CFO work for the pest control industry.
You haven't forgotten your checklist already.
Yeah,
all right, keep going.
Anyway, so this episode, as others are, sponsored by our sponsors. The first one is for digital marketing, Coalmarch by WorkWave. If you want to get some work done by them, visit their website, coalmarch.com. And then for those of you who are looking for insurance for the pest control market, it's PestSure. Visit them at pestsure.com. They offer general liability, auto, workers' comp, and a host of others. And today, really, really cool episode. Today is really just awesome. Okay, so we have a fella named Lenny Gray. Lenny is the author of the Door-to-Door Millionaire and More Door-to-Door Millionaire. He wrote these books to teach his proven sales techniques to other companies, to bring transparency to an industry that's often criticized for unethical sales practices. His reputation speaks for itself. We've had a bunch of clients who have worked with him and just say the greatest things. So welcome, Lenny. Tell us a little bit about yourself. We're here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dan.
Lenny, before you get going, I have two things. Number one, Dan, I love you, but you missed the check. Yes, the title, the topic.
Oh, shoot.
So just for our listeners, the title for this episode is Door to Door, Get the Sales You Need with a Proven Playbook That Works. And we came up with this episode because I am not ashamed to admit, nor am I am a happy client of Lenny's. We've used him here at Triangle, and he did a fantastic job. I thought it'd be great to bring him onto the podcast, talk a little bit about what he does, talk a little bit about door to door in general. I thought it'd be a great conversation. So that's my disclaimer. That's me cleaning up Dan's checklist. And now, Lenny, hello, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, boy.
Here we are. Better late than never. Right. So, Dan, you did fantastic.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
And been in the door-to-door game for 25 years now. This is year 25 for me, and enjoyed the ride. Never thought in a million years I'd own a pest control company and be teaching door-to-door sales training, but that's what I do. And got into it. Actually, a buddy of mine from high school talked to me about it one summer. I went and served a 2-year church mission, and I got back, and he got back, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to go sell pest control door." I've never heard of pest control. I'm born and raised in Utah. My parents couldn't afford it anyway. We couldn't afford a pest control company. So never had one, never knew that was even a thing. So I did not believe him. And I said, "Why don't you go out and do it? And if it's real, then let me know and I'll do it with you in the next year." And sure enough, he called me in September and said, "Hey, I made 25 grand or whatever it was. And you need to come out. I'm going to be a manager, a team lead in Birmingham, Alabama, and you need to come join me." So that was my start. I started in Birmingham, Alabama. My wife and I, we packed up everything we owned in our Nissan Altima. We drove across the country, set up shop in Homewood, Alabama, and the rest is history from there.
Wow. Well, welcome to the podcast, and we're very glad to have you here. And I thought it'd be good just to get us started in talking about door to door as an overall sales strategy. Some listeners are door-to-door companies, some of our listeners are not. And I thought it'd be good just to kind of talk through what do you, for you, Lenny, what do you see door to door as a sales strategy, what are some of the pros? What are some of the cons? Can you just kind of talk through that, just the general strategy to begin with, and then we'll get in, about recruiting and kind of some of the functional things of actually doing it. But can you just high level, what are some good things about door to door? What are some things that you really need to be paying attention to and watch out for?
Yeah, I think for door to door, it's a very targeted method, right? You can specify a specific city, a zip code, a neighborhood where you want growth, where you want a customer base. And so being targeted versus something online, you run SEO, you run an advertisement on the radio or television, whatever. You never know where things are going to be coming in. You don't know if it's even the demographic of client that you're looking for. You can get a little bit of everything. With door to door, it's a lot more targeted. You get that route density that makes it nicer for the technical staff to do their job in a more efficient way. Obviously, get more done in a day's time when there's less windshield time. Even from the higher level of your P&L and fuel expenses and those types of things. Wear and tear on your trucks and your tires, and I mean it goes. Any way you can get that route density not locked in. It's a lot more. It's a lot more convenient and it's just a better play for a business in general. I think from a con standpoint, certainly there's a reputation with door to door, and again, that's why I wrote 2 books about door to door sales. Is when I got into the industry in the late '90s, there was really nothing out there, and it was this weird, strange, you got to lie, cheat, and steal your way into getting business, and there really wasn't much content. So that was one of the primary reasons I wrote these books is to shed some light on this industry that does receive kind of a bad knock. So you do get that. Even as great as you can train your reps, I mean, inevitably you're going to knock on somebody's door. They're having a bad day, and you get the brunt of it. And they see maybe your logo on their shirt and go, okay, triangle, gotcha. I'm going to leave you a bad review because you woke up my baby, or whatever, whatever the case may be. So that's a challenge. And then obviously the cost nowadays, we'll get into the recruiting and that and building a program. But if you're looking to sub that out, it's a very expensive thing right now, which is, from where I came from 25 years ago to today. Part of me wishes I was knocking today. Obviously not really, because I've built this empire of pest control companies and we're doing what we're doing with training other people and helping our clients out to grow their businesses. But yeah, it's a very expensive route to go right now.
So just to summarize that, I mean, it sounds like under the pro side, I agree with you as far as the profitability aspect and windshield time and density but one of the things that I also feel like is a huge pro is just the amount of volume that doors can bring in terms of sales. I don't know of another, and Dan, you feel free to plug in here, but I don't know of another sales strategy that can bring the kind of volume that doors can. I mean, even digital.
I mean, I would say that you don't look at it as a marketing. You look at it as a client acquisition. So if I'm going to buy a company, what's the multiple I'm going to pay? And even if you have a high attrition rate, it's still cheaper than buying a company. And this way you get exactly what you want. Mm-hmm. But I think that if you're going to go with it, it's not for the faint of heart, and you got to know what you're doing, right, Lenny? I mean, it's not just, okay, guys, break. Everybody knock on doors. There's a strategy to it. And also there's a whole volume thing. So one of the things that we see, and Lenny, maybe you could talk to this, and it's not on our outline, but is the completion percentage, right? They go out and sell 50 accounts today. Can you get all of those serviced, or do some of them, end up not going at all? I mean, is that a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to unpack there, but I think first and foremost is in this world, we look at pre-service cancels and post-service cancels and what makes sense. Because if you're training correctly, you don't want your door-to-door team to go out there, and if they're getting, what they sell is getting serviced 100% of the time, then they're just selling the low-hanging fruit. They're selling the easy ones, in my opinion. So to me, I like to see that attrition rate where if you have around 1 in 10, maybe as high as 2 in 10 that are canceling pre-service, then I think that's an okay number. That means you're stretching somebody. You're actually selling people that might have a change of heart. They might decide differently 24 hours later, 12 hours later, whatever the case may be. That's okay. We don't want it to go too high though.
No,
Now we've
that's
got,
interesting. Yeah,
yeah, we,
I didn't think anything was acceptable. Once a
yeah.
salesman sells
Oh
something, right?
no, I think there's definitely acceptability levels there,
Yeah.
but you start getting too high, and then the rep has issues with solidifying the sale, or their value build's weak, or my sales flow process that I teach. There's a breakdown in there that we've got to find out what that reason is for such a high turnover rate pre-service. Now post-service, that's when we want to lock them in. You got to be under 5% post-service. Once that service has been done, you get that initial service taken care of. You want the good majority of your accounts to stick around. That has to be the case. Now that being said, again, there's the inevitable of somebody loses their job in between those services. Somebody has to move for work, or there's a death, or there's a lot of different things that are, I would say, that are acceptable, that are understandable from an attrition rate post service.
Right.
I want to come back to something that Dan said, and it's kind of going with what you're saying as well, Lenny. But we're talking about cons, and Dan's 100% correct. About looking at it as customer acquisition. If you're going to go out and let's say you're going to buy a quality company, you're going to pay 3x or 2.5 or 4.5. I don't know. Like, who knows where that number is going to
It's well more than what you can do door to door.
Yes, exactly. But let's just say you're going to pay 1x or 0.75 or whatever. The difference is, and this is a huge, huge difference, and I want to make sure our audience understands this, is that you got to have some cash. Like, this is not a strategy for like, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this acquisition and the bank is behind it, and we're going to show them the financials and they're going to fund this out over a 10 or 20 year period. No, this is like the reps have to get paid. They got to get paid that year. So really need to pay attention to that, because I'm not aware of any bank that would say, here's $1 million, go hire a door team. Unless you guys know of one. I don't know.
I'll give you a few that would definitely say no, but
yeah, exactly. So yes. I mean, I guess that's another thing I would just mention to our audience is that, if you're going to chase this, you need to make sure that you've got some money in the coffers, because you're not going to get the benefit that you would get with a normal acquisition. Not trying to argue that you do either, just more of just kind of, hey, an awareness. And so let's talk a little bit about, like, if you decide to go this way, what are some musts that, in your opinion, Lenny, that you got to have like in place in order to execute it? Now, Dan's already brought up one, which is the ability to service a lot of accounts at one time. If you got door teams out selling, 20, 30, 40, 50 accounts a day, what are some other musts that you think, a company should really be thinking through before they decide to go in after door-to-door as a strategy?
Yeah, well, and I've appreciated past episodes that you all have done. I'm a fan, and when we talk about planning and we talk about training, in particular, that to me is huge. From the last episode there, and I feel like what training does is not only does it generate results, but then results generate retention. I think that's one of the biggest fails that people getting into door to door have, is they don't train properly, and it's blood, sweat, and tears to hire direct sales reps. Absolutely. It's not easy, because it's not for the faint of heart, as Dan said. And so you get these reps that are willing, but they're not able. And then they get out there and they fail, and they don't really have proper expectations. And then, 2.5 days later, 5 days later, they're out the back door.
Yeah, I'm not cut out for this. Yep.
Yeah, that's inevitable. So the right training, to me, is key to, once those reps taste success early, that they'll continue to do the hard work that door to door is. And then they're going to be retained. In fact, that helps recruiting as well, because now you got people telling their friends about it. And now you've kind of created this recruiting wheel because of proper training. You get the results, you get the retention, now you get the recruiting. There's our 3 R's right there for those of you that appreciate that. So yeah, I think there's a process there in terms of finding a way to get that right training. And lo and behold, that's something that I do. That's a piece of, in fact, Donnie, like I said, Triangle's a client of mine, and I just couldn't do it as well as I could because of the volume of people that I'm having in the home service industry that have reached out to me to say, hey, we'd like you to come out to our office and spend a couple days and do your training camp. So now I've got that all online. You can buy the entire package. I've got it's about a 30,000 word playbook. It's a 3-hour audio version of the book that I narrate, I self narrate. And then I've got a training camp video that's another 2.5 hours. And so all of these things now, I feel like somebody can go out and purchase those, and now they have that consistency and continuity in their training. Because what I've seen happen over the years of me being involved in the consulting game is somebody is going to hire, they've got a manager that's running this program. Well, then that manager quits or leaves or takes another job in the company. And then you've got these reps that were trained one way, new manager comes in, wants to train everybody another way. And there's not that consistency and continuity in the training. So that was my vision behind creating this. And it can be found at lennygray.com/training. But I created this package that you can have into perpetuity in your company. And you can have that consistency when you have reps coming in 1 year to the next, or even 1 month or 1 week to the next. So I think primarily, just to circle back to the original question, is you've got to have a dialed in training program, the know-how to put something like this together.
So one of the things that you mentioned before was just setting expectations with reps. Something that I have learned this year is that, and we kind of failed on this to begin with, and I don't want to jump into the confessions of triangle and door-to-door and wins and losses, but when I think about must, it's almost like you have to, door-to-door is hard work. Like, it's legit. Like, you've got to really be on your, I mean, it's almost like at least for us, we thought we were going to go the marathon route, and that kind of failed. And I'm more and more kind of realizing, like, it's kind of a gut out sprint, in your season. Mm-hmm. And then people need a break, like you can't, and maybe I'm just adding my own thing here, Lenny. And I mean, feel free to correct me if you think I'm off the rails here, but to me, like, the thing I've noticed, the folks who really get results, it's a all out, gut out sprint. And then they need a break or whatever. I mean, I don't know. Have you noticed that? Or is that something I'm just making up?
No, and I've seen it both ways. And I think, generally speaking, that it's the sprinter version where you're out there in the summer, because you look at the demographic of those that are willing to do door to door in the first place, and it's normally your teens, late teens to 20s. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, maybe in between colleges, that's how I got my start in door to door, doing it in between the summers of college years. So it's one of those things to where I feel like you can do both. It just takes a different type of person. It's a different hire for, the marathon version, the year-round version, versus maybe more of your summer sales model.
Gotcha. So if I'm a listener to the podcast right now, and I've been thinking about door-to-door, and I'm listening to this episode, and I've got zero experience in this industry, what advice would you give an owner, a manager, or whomever? Like, okay, this is how you should think about getting started, and here's a path for you to go down. Like, what would you say to someone that's kind of sitting in the seat and thinking about this as a strategy?
So a real easy way to do this is literally to go to my website and schedule a call with me. I schedule a call with potential clients. It's a 15-minute call. It normally ends up being a little longer than that. But ideally, every week I have time set aside in my schedule, and they always get filled up, where business owners are reaching out to me, or managers, sales managers are reaching out to me, and just asking the questions specific to their industry, specific to their company's situation, on if a door-to-door team makes sense or not. And I'm very honest and upfront with those things. If I don't think somebody should do it, and I think they'll get more bang for their buck somewhere else, or what size they should start at, that's another thing to consider. Most people think, well, I'm going to go out and get 50 people to go knock doors, and they're each going to sell 100 accounts, and so I can start counting the dollars of how many millions we're going to do in revenue this year. That's not really how it works. So I'm always happy. And again, lennygray.com, set up a free call with me, and I can go through some of those things that maybe aren't covered in the podcast, or you can't get on my social media stuff out there as well.
So you've done a bunch of, I'm sure you've done a bunch of those calls. And when you come across somebody that you just don't think should do it, what are the reasons? Who shouldn't do this?
Yeah, I think if you're somebody who, again, does not have the capital, as Donnie mentioned, or does not have the, I'm trying to think of the nice way to put it. I'll put it how you said it, Dan. Just they're faint of heart, let's say, and they just don't have that. It's a risk reward thing, right? And so depending on where the business is, if somebody came to me and says, we're really struggling, we don't know if we're going to shut our doors, so we want to just put all our chips in the middle of the table and door to door, I would probably say, unless you're doing it as the owner, unless you're going door to door, and I will teach you how to do it yourself, but unless you're doing it, don't do it. I mean, I look back at the beginnings of our company when we started back in 2003. In 2003, started our own pest control company. The only sales rep we had that summer was me. I knocked for about 5 months, and the only person we had hired to do the technical work was my business partner, and it was just the two of us. And I would sell, he would service, and we did that until I got enough sales to where we started hiring other technicians to do to take over routes and those types of things. So I just think if somebody is on their last leg and nothing else is working or something like that, I would say one of the last things you want to do is door to door, unless you're invested in it, unless you want to do it personally.
Yeah. Normally, I feel like if you're in that
interesting.
situation, you probably got some bigger picture company things that need to get fixed before you try to scale it anyway.
Well, there's so one of the things that you said, Donnie, before, you can buy a company and you can finance that company and go to the bank and everything. And with a marketing campaign or a sales campaign, you can't really bank it unless you have a credit line. And sometimes you have that credit line. What's your recommendation? Let's say I have $1 million available to me on a credit line. And I say, hey, Lenny, let's go do a door campaign. Would you say, yeah, go tap that thing for $1 million, or would you advise against it, or what do you think?
Yeah, it's different in that, because my pest control company, we've done acquisitions as well, and obviously we've done door to door for a long time. So we've been on both sides of the fence, and it's a different mindset in terms of if you employ a door to door sales team. The great thing about door to door is it's expensive, but it's also pay to play. Like we do 100% commission unless we're talking the marathon route. If we're talking the marathon route, then we've got to put in a little salary and some bonuses and maybe a vehicle and some of those type of perks. But if we're talking purely summer sales, door to door, at its most raw, then yeah, you're going to be paying handsomely for those accounts, and you're going to be paying that though as things are getting served. There's a few ways to set it up. You can do pay go, and you're basically paying as each service is done. As a client is receiving service, or you can do an advance to reps and then have back end checks. And there's a lot of different strategies behind that. A lot of that depends on if they have that capital at their disposal. If there's some spacing out of when that capital becomes available to them, or depending on what the loan looks like, or wherever they're getting their funds from.
So you don't want to play with scared money. You want to make sure that you're committed, right? So
unless it's you. Like I said, I feel like that's what I did for me, is I banked on me. And I said, I'd sold for Orkin for 3 years, and I said, when my business partner and I were talking about this, I said, you can bank on me. I don't, we're 50-50 owners here. You don't need to pay me commissions or anything. I'm going to bank on myself, and that's what a business owner has the most to gain and the most to lose. So I'm always in that camp of if you really want to roll the dice, then you just got to get out there and do it yourself.
And
so
hang on, before you move on, just for our listeners, High Roller Gordon there. I will say, for me personally, if I were sitting on $1 million line, I would dedicate 40 to 50%. I would not tap my entire. That's me personally, my risk tolerance. I would not just because,
that's hedging, sitting on the fence.
Well, here's what I'll tell you. I have learned over many years, it's way easier to take out of that line than it is to put it back. So I'm just saying.
Right. And well, there's definitely.
We're of that same opinion, guys. I mean, we've never put all our eggs in the basket of door to door. There's no way. I mean, it's the chair analogy, right? You need to have multiple legs on a chair for it to be stable. And we've actually had summers where I can count on one hand how many door to door reps we've had, and we've still grown. I mean, that to me is that's the golden goose of being in a position of having a door-to-door sales team or not, is you're going to grow regardless because of other ways that we're growing. So door-to-door is awesome, as we've mentioned, with the quickness and the velocity of growth that you can have. that's incredible. And the route density and all those things. But at the same time, if we don't need it, we don't have to do it. If we have a down recruiting year, or it's just not the quality of reps that we want, okay, we'll just keep plugging along, doing what we're doing. We'll grow anyway.
So what happens if you decide, so let's say you decide to do this. So what are the administrative things? How do we recruit? How many folks do we have on the doors? What kind of tracking and what are you doing to set that up administratively? Because I'm sure it is a bit of a puzzle, right?
Oh yeah. No, it really depends on how many reps and how much growth that you want. What my advice is this: I always tell my clients, I say, listen, if you can look at each rep, and this would be a new rep, so somebody that's a new hire, if you look at each of them as generating about $50,000 of revenue in your business, that's where the goal should be. That's about a sell a day if you're looking at a 16-week summer, 98 knocking days ish, or something around there. If that's what we're doing, then the expectation should be around $50,000 in generated revenue per rep. And if I can do that, then I can decide, hey, do I really want to blow this out of the water and hire 20 reps and get to the million mark? Or do I want to do half that? Or do I want to do just 2 or 3 reps? If that's kind of, if I'm dipping my toes in the water and just seeing if this will be a viable, growth strategy for my company. So that's one way to look at it. The other thing, just logistically, is you need somebody to manage these reps. You can't just send them out there and expect that they're going to be so personally motivated that they're just going to go out and do it without somebody shepherding them, so to speak. And so daily training meetings are important. You have sales training meetings, you do practicing and role playing and all those things in those meetings to generate that level of competency. So when they go out, they're hitting those numbers. Now, I look at it as far as tracking reps that are already out there. I always look at it and go, the closing ratio, there's been studies done on closing ratio for different door-to-door industries or different home service industries doing door-to-door. For pest control, it can hover between 1% and 3%. And so you think about that and you go, okay, somebody's got to knock 100 doors and one person might say yes. And not even knocking doors. I don't want to get there. They have to talk to 100 people. I don't even track how many doors my reps knock. I think that's a wasted movement, so to speak, as far as tracking data. I want to know how many conversations my reps are having, and then I want to find out of those conversations how many people they qualify. They generate a level of interest. I have 3 primary qualifiers that maybe we get into, maybe we don't. But and then I want to know what their closing ratio is. And then what I can do is I can take those numbers and find out what part of the chain is broken or needs to be mended a little bit, because I can dial in and say, okay, this rep is a really great closer, but none of his accounts are getting serviced. So we probably need to look at solidifying the sale. Maybe he's above those attrition numbers we talked about earlier. So those are the numbers I look for. And again, the goal ultimately, when you're talking about pest and lawn, the goal is to talk to 7 people an hour, to get in front of 7 potential buyers an hour. If you can just measure that, if that's the only KPI you're worried about, that in and of itself will tell most of the story. Not all of it, but you have to have reps that are getting in front of people, because one of the worst jobs in the world with door-to-door, one of the worst things that can happen is you go out there and you don't talk to anybody, because it's boring. You're going to get inside your own head. You're not making any money, and it just gets miserable, and it's a downward spiral from there.
So it's 1% to 3%. So you're getting the door slammed on your face 97 to 99 times out of 100.
Yeah, and the goal is 50 people a day.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
You'd want to talk to 50 people a day. That's kind of our benchmark for our employees. So yeah, you're getting a lot. Now if you're good at it, if you can endure that difficulty of the first part. I mean, I have reps and myself, could be thrown in that. Sometimes you sell 50% of the people you talk to in a day. Sometimes it's 70%. Sometimes it's 80. So there are sunnier days ahead. But for brand new reps that you're recruiting and getting out there on the doors, you have to set a proper expectation, and that expectation is you're going to get your teeth kicked in for a little while, and that's just part of it.
I'm laughing at Dan. The door slammed on you 99. They're going to spit on you too, I guess. But anyway, so one thing we kind of glossed over this. This is a huge deal, and I want to spend a little bit more time on it, which is recruiting. And how do you get a team? I mean, I know every single person that's listening to this podcast, they're having some sort of issue in recruiting, whether or not it's with a door team or not. I mean, it could be with technicians, it could be with office staff or whatever. And maybe I'm being overly presumptuous here, but every time I talk to someone, this seems to be the hottest topic that we're talking about. And I got to believe that's even more difficult for folks who are signing up for this kind of work. So can you just talk a little bit through like, well, how do you go about getting a team and what are your options? You know, like, again, we're going back to the person that doesn't have, has not gotten into this strategy yet. Okay. So they're going to call you. What are you going to advise people? Like, this is how you get started in terms of getting a team. What would you say?
Yeah, I think you need to find yourself hanging out, or those that are going to be leading these teams. They have to hang out where these teenagers, 20 somethings are hanging out. You have to get in front of those people. And where are they now? Well, they're probably, if they're like my kids, they're on their phones and they're TikTok and Instagram and all of those things, and they're on social media. And so if you can get in front of them, and you have to think about, can you connect with them? A lot of business owners, I mean, I'm in my 40s, a lot of business owners that are maybe even in their 30s, or maybe they're just a very, mature 20-something-year-old, whatever the case may be, they probably can't really connect. I mean, I remember for me, when I got out of recruiting in my own company with door to door, as far as the grassroots level, it was when I had kids that were the age of these kids. And I'm just like, I am having a really hard time relating to a 19-year-old now. I've got a son who's 19. So for me, it's finding the right people to get in those groups and finding out where they're hanging out. And then again, we can talk about recruiting meetings and what you do there, and some consistency level of getting people to show up at the same place at the same time, whether you're recruiting on college campuses or maybe around the local watering holes, where a lot hang out, maybe off campus, those types of things. There's a lot of ways that you can find these people, but you have to be hanging out or have your people hanging out where they're hanging out.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. So one other thing, and we're getting close to the end here, so I want to try to make the most out of our time here. So if someone is very, very interested in finding these people that are hanging out, would they say, okay, we're all going to Utah, or are they going to be like, we're going to do it local at our local colleges? Like what's the, what would be a strategy for even finding the person that is hanging out with these folks?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple thoughts on that. So, because we've had it work both ways really well over the years, and we've had some locals that have just crushed it. We had a group in Michigan in one of our offices one year, was the top group. None of them had ever done sales. They were in a sales program at their school, I believe it was in Western Michigan. And we hired them out to drive a couple hours down the road and hang out in the metro of Detroit. And they were our top group. And it wasn't, anybody from Utah or anybody that done church missions or anything like that. You don't need that. Again, I'm going to go back to the training, right? You need to have the proper training. You need to train them the right way. And but again, that was a group of people that that really had no business, so to speak, in being our top office, but they were. Certainly you can, if you transplant people outside, it reminds me of the story of my COO, who's been with us since, year 2, basically, of our operation. And his first year, he was a, kid right out of high school, and he drove his car from Idaho down to, I believe it was Albuquerque. And he got to Albuquerque, and in 2 weeks, he sold nothing. And he said, I can't do this. There's no way. And he says, the only reason I stayed is because I had no money to drive home for gas or get an airplane ticket home. I had to stay. And he ended up being the top first year rep in his office that year because he stayed. And so sometimes it's setting proper expectations, whether somebody has gone out of state or down the road, further away, or maybe they're just local. I always tell my reps, you can't even tell me if you're going to be able to do this or not until you've talked to 600 people. That's our expectation. That's 50 people a day, 6 days a week for 2 weeks. Your first 2 weeks, I couldn't care less how it goes. Again, if the expectation's set that it's going to be very difficult, you're going to hear a lot of no's, but just use that as a learning environment, that it's almost like a paid training, on the job training, so to speak, even though if they're 100% commission, they're not going to get paid, but maybe you can advance, or there's different ways we can look at doing that. But as long as you have that rep with proper expectations, they can gut out those first 2 weeks, it gets a lot easier because the objections start becoming the exact same ones. And then you become, a lot better equipped to handle those objections. In fact, one of my main strategies is getting in front of objections, having objections. You state those objections before the customer is going to bring them up. If you can get in those habits and really start to dial in this process that I teach, then it just becomes so much easier.
Right.
So
Right.
if you wanted to get involved with this, and you said it's kind of it's a long game. It's not, you're not just going to succeed right away. So there's consultants like yourself who can help put it together. There are sales companies that I guess have overflows that, and they're kind of farming out their guys. If you want to come out of the box and win right away, would you hire one of those companies, see what they're doing, hire you, see what you're doing, and try to do it? It just seems to me that if you've never done this before, it's a huge investment and it's highly risky. How would you do it if you were somebody who said, okay, I want to do it. We're good. Let's go.
So I have a few clients, even that we'd use that, I would trust to hire out. The challenge with hiring out, though, unless a company's been properly vetted, I have seen train wrecks year over year over year with people trying to hire this company out of Utah, where somebody comes in saying, they're the next greatest thing. They'll get 100 reps on the doors. And, what ends up happening a lot of time, and you had mentioned this, Dan, with the overflow. A lot of companies that just recruit too many, which, hey, that'd be a great problem to have, we all think, but they recruit too many. Well, I promise you that the reps they're sending you are not their cream of the crop. They might say they are, but they're not. And
Right.
then you get that situation where people are coming in and they're bought into that marketing company. They're not bought into your pest control, your lawn care company. And they don't really care. They don't really have a connection with you. And I don't mean to sound trite there,
Mhm.
but really they're just in there to make as much money as they can. And well, inevitably what happens, they don't represent your brand well enough. And then you get a lot of people that, you ruin some of your, reputation, some of your, we all try so hard as business owners to get these 5-star reviews and look a certain way in our online presence. And that gets hammered. And then you have these reps that call crying to their managers, 3 weeks into the summer. Well, they're not taking care of us and they're this, we want to go somewhere else. And next thing you know, you have zero. And you've hired the technicians, you've bought the trucks, you've wrapped the trucks, you've got the equipment, you've got the products, you've done everything you could possibly do to roll the red carpet out for these guys, and they could be gone like that. And so I'm really opposed to somebody going in blindly trying to recruit some kind of door-to-door team out of Utah or Idaho or wherever else. Now, if I've vetted them, if I've used them, I mean, there are, like I said, there's a few out there that I would trust that would take care of business, or I would say that even, the cost is going to be outrageous even for these ones. So I normally, I would say my primary thing is let's teach you how to do it. Let's be patient with us. Let's not have expectations of doing $1 million your first year in door to door, but let's set some benchmarks that you can work towards and really build this recruiting funnel, because you can build it. It just takes people having success. If they have success, they're going to tell their friends, they're going to come back again. Experienced reps, their closing ratio is not 3%. It could be, 10 to 20%, on average. And then you're looking at perpetuating something, that you can actually build on rather than just trying to sub it out every summer.
So
Well,
here's one that I was looking at, or I was talking to somebody the other day, a door team, a bunch of guys. And what they were saying is that a lot of these outsourced guys are selling for much higher prices than their competition. So they're able to recruit better because they can talk to their reps or their potential reps and say, you're going to make much more money this summer. The problem is they're selling at such high prices that their attrition is pretty high because the next guy. How do you feel about that? Is that something that you've encountered?
Yeah, that's kind of probably within the last 6 or 7 years, you've seen that, where it used to be a volume play and you'd see a lot of reps just trying to hit that volume. And I think reps got smarter and maybe a little lazier. I don't know, maybe a combination of both. I'm not sure what it is, But then reps thought, well, geez, I can work half as hard as I used to, sell just, not sell, maybe sell half as many accounts, but if I double the contract value, right, then I'm going to get paid just as much as I would have selling half as much. So I think there is some of that goes into it. So yeah, and you as the business owner, you have the authority to say, this is our pricing parameters. And I think some business owners have made that mistake of saying, just sell it for as high as you can sell it. And that's a problem.
Yeah,
and that's not the right way to do it. Because then you have people talk to people, right? Like, hey, my mom and dad are down the road from me, or my sister lives, the city across town. Why am I paying twice as much as her? And then that's where door to door gets that bad rap. So it used to be like, we're selling as low as we can, for door to door to get the volume. And now we're going to sell as high as we can when we feel we got somebody on the hook. But either way, you're just not fitting where your pricing structure is set up and how your company's set up. And that's a problem as well. So yeah, you see it from the high contract values all the way down to the low contract values. There's challenges there.
Well, right. I will say this has been, so I think, Dan, we need to have Lenny on for another episode. We have not, I was going to say, we have not gotten through nearly half our outline here, and this has been great. And all I can say is amen, brother Lenny, to the things that can happen, because it certainly happened with us. We use an outside company, and everything you just mentioned, I can confirm.
I didn't want to say anything.
I
was list. I was saying, yep, that's triangle. Yep.
Yeah, I can confirm.
They up and left halfway through the summer.
Yeah. No, I can confirm. So, and I about lost my head when that all went down. But anyway, so with that, Lenny, this has been fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on board. Like I said, for our listeners, we're gonna put Lenny's contact info up on our show notes. We'll link his website, those types of things. Just a reminder that all the resources and topics that we talked about today are available on the podcast website, pmpindustryinsider.com. And as always, if you enjoyed the show, we appreciate any ratings and reviews that you can give us. And like I always say, all complaints go to Dan. And with that, we're going to sign off. Thanks again, Lenny. We'll see you all next time. Take care now.
Thanks, Lenny.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Bye.